I don't think I'm going to see anything like this ever in my lifetime.
Again, after this?
Yes, I think we are witnessing history right now.
One of the greatest things about Flesh and Blood is its consistently balanced gameplay. For the majority of its half-decade as a competitive card game, it's managed to maintain a relatively balanced meta, letting games and tournaments be primarily decided by the skill of the players. But sometimes, as is true with all trading card games, things break down. And sometimes when they break down, they really...
Oh no.
Really...
Oh, another way to gain even more life!
Really break down. Today is the story of one such time. Welcome to the first episode of Showstoppers, where we take a look at the most powerful heroes and decks in the history of the game, as well as iconic moments in coverage, be it underdog stories, bad beats, or 500 IQ plays by some of the greatest minds in this wonderful game of ours. Now let's get to it because I am so excited to talk about today's Showstopper. In today's episode, we will be discussing what is arguably the most broken deck in the history of Flesh and Blood, and a deck which led to the first ever card having to be banned from the Living Legend format. This deck was only legal for one major tournament, a single ProQuest Plus, and we're in luck because not only was the event live streamed, giving us access to some of the most ridiculous Flesh and Blood coverage you will ever see, but the player on the receiving end of that absolute clown fiesta was Smashing Good Team's own Summer, who was kind enough to hop on a call and give us her breakdown of what happened.
Summer, for the folks at home, what is the quick and dirty of how you got into Flesh and Blood and a little bit of who you are, I guess?
All right. Well, I am a feminist and a person of loud opinions on the internet.
Excellent.
In Chicago, which is where I started playing Flesh and Blood after the game that I was playing, Gwent, for all of you Gwent heads out there, announced that it was shutting down. It would be shutting down end of 2023. So this was 2022, and I started looking for a new game to play because I really liked having a community and stuff like that. And I also wanted to get myself off the computer so much and get out, especially after, COVID lockdown had eased a little bit, and I was still fairly new to Chicago. I moved here at the end of 2019, so I had about 3 months to make a couple friends before everything shut down. And I wanted to go out, make more friends, meet people, and the community. And I heard about Flesh and Blood, and I knew that it happened in Chicago. So I met some people, showed up to our LGS, Good Games, where I embarrassed myself because I didn't know that you had to sign up for like a gem account.
You just showed up and you're like, I'm here.
I was like, I'm here to play.
So in Milwaukee that weekend, the Sunday ProQuest Plus was like basically a brand new LL format with Rosetta. Starvo had recently been nerfed with a bunch of restrictions. So did you have much of a pulse on LL going into the weekend, or were you just mostly excited to get to play some Lexi Livewire again?
Yeah, I gotta be honest. I was only there to play Lexi. I just like fully tunnel visioned on playing Lexi. I'm like, yay, my girl. Because I started around Outsiders, but of course, because Lexi was best stack at the time, she was so expensive to build, and I had just bought a bunch of her stuff. I had like cold foiled out as much as I could, so I was so excited. And I was just like, you showed up, and there were 20 people at the PQ Plus when there had been, like 120
right
at the battle garden the day before, and everyone was like, oh yeah, like screw this, we're not playing LL. But it turned out to work out for me.
Yeah, I mean, can't be mad at top fouring in such a broken metagame without playing the broken thing.
Rosetta, the Flesh and Blood expansion featuring Lightning and Earth, Wizard, and Rune Blades, released in September of 2024. Battle-hardened Milwaukee fell on the following weekend, giving players just 1 week to try and break open the new formats. I say formats because while the Battle-hardened on Saturday was Classic Constructed, the ProQuest Plus on the following day was the Living Legend format. LSS had begun making an effort to promote Living Legend ahead of the upcoming Calling in Chicago, which featured the format as its main event. Quick rundown for the newer players here. Living Legend is essentially the eternal format of Flesh and Blood. Card sets and individual cards don't rotate, bans notwithstanding, but individual heroes and their signature weapons, remember that part, can achieve Living Legend status through acquisition of points based on tournament wins. This means that the heroes and their weapons are no longer legal in Classic Constructed, but do get retrains, and are instead regulated committed to the Living Legend format, where the strongest heroes in the history of the game get to do the powerful things that won them so many tournaments. For a while, the format had progressed to be surprisingly well balanced, despite having 0 banned cards and only a handful of restrictions. At the time, no single hero or weapon seemed too powerful for what the rest of the format could do. Among these heroes of old was the Ice Wizard, Icelander Stormbind, a disruptive hero that sent arcane damage on the opponent's turn while giving them frostbite tokens. Icelander did a great job of disrupting the opponent on their own turn while maximizing value from Waning Moon, a wizard staff that gets more powerful if used on the opponent's turn. But Waning Moon isn't Icelander's signature weapon. It's just a regular weapon, not tied to any hero, and therefore still legal in Classic Constructed, where wizards like Verdant still use it today. More on her later. Icelander's signature weapon is Kraken's Aethervein, and before the deck that is the topic of today's video, this weapon basically had no resume to speak of. In fact, players were so accustomed to seeing Icelander equipped with Waning Moon, they thought that when she ascended to Living Legend status, she'd be taking Waning Moon with her. But instead, she left the format with Kraken's Aethervein, leaving Waning Moon legal in Classic Constructed. I think it's critical to our story today that Kraken's Aethervein is not legal in Classic Constructed, despite never having made an impact on the format. I think if it had been, it's possible LSS would have been compelled to take some preemptive action on what they knew was to come. Instead, and thankfully for us, Kraken's Aethervein was only legal in Living Legend, and a relatively lower stakes tournament like a ProQuest Plus was the perfect setting to limit test this powerful, relatively unexplored format. So what happened with the release of Rosetta that so profoundly shook the core of the Living Legend metagame?
It was a smaller turnout. Do you remember, like, the atmosphere of the tournament during the Swiss rounds? Was everybody playing aware of the Verdant's deck, or was sort of a horrific realization dawning on the players as the rounds went on?
So yeah, everyone else was sort of prepared for it. I was the one who was having like a horrific realization that something was happening. There were I believe 2 players who were on the Verdant's list. In between rounds, I would get updates, be like, oh, you know, he like killed this guy for like $1 million. Like, what are you talking about? I still had no idea what was going on. Like, I had heard that there's this broken Verdant's deck, but I had no idea what it was doing or how it works. Because I just like had in my cloud. I had in the cloud like La La Land.
You were activating Voltaire. You had more important things to worry about.
There are 2 key components to Rosetta that led to the creation of the most powerful deck in the history of Flesh and Blood. The first is the introduction of an Earth Wizard, Verdance, and the second is the introduction of a new wizard mechanic, Amp. Verdance is the first ever Earth Wizard in the game, and her hero ability does not matter at all for our story today. We're too busy breaking the game in half. All that matters is that she's partially themed around life gain, and to support this strategy is an innocuous little split card named Rampant Growth Life. Life gains you a life, and Rampant Growth amps your next source of arcane damage equal to the amount of life you've gained that turn. So your next source of arcane will deal that much more damage. Time to get back to that rinky-dink little staff that never hurt anybody, Kraken's Aethervein. So we've got a cost of 3 resources for an instant ability, meaning we can follow it up, that deals 1 arcane damage to the opponent and then draws a card for each damage dealt. And draws a card for each damage dealt. So what would happen if we, say, shoved a bunch of life gain in our deck, maxed out on copies of Rampant Growth Life, plus an equipment piece to create a virtual 4th copy, and activated our Kraken's Aethervein to deal, I don't know, 31 arcane damage? What if I then drew 31 cards and, I don't know, attacked with a fire breathing, which lets me pay any amount of resources to buff the attack by that much? Perhaps I lead with a Thrive or 2 so that every activation buffs the attack by 3 instead of 1. Could I, theoretically, attack with that double thrived fire breathing and pitch the 20-something remaining cards in my hand to buff it to its ability? Let's ask Summer.
Did you play against the Verdants in Swiss or not until that top 4 stream match?
No, I completely dodged.
Wow.
I did, however, I had a Prism Gauntlet that I went through.
So during that semi-final match, we see a little bit of banter between you and the opponent, but the mics weren't hot for the entire time. Do you recall any particularly funny exchanges between you and your opponent? I definitely noticed at the end of the match, we can make out you mouthing the words please and ban, I'm pretty sure.
Very true, yeah. Like at this point, I knew that something was up with this deck, and I was just gonna lose so badly. And my opponent Logan and I were like, this is not going to be a real game. And so Logan and I and the judge, we were just sitting down. We were just having a good time. We're like, this is just going to be a fun game, like very low stakes. So, we still have to go through all the procedures and everything. And the judge hands me Logan's deck list. And I look at it and I cannot interpret the information that I'm seeing because the combo is based on cards from Everfest that I've never seen before. And I'm profoundly lazy and I don't go look at older cards. I know Ranger cards and that's it. That's all I know.
I didn't know what fire breathing was until I really started doing the research for this video.
Who at this time knew what fire breathing was? So I looked at it, and yeah, this was before the camera started rolling. This was like before start of game procedure, and I looked at them, and I was like, "Yeah, I do have a question." And they were like, "Yeah," like all earnest. And I'm like, "Do you want to say yum yum every time you discard Fruit of the Forest?"
Can that be an official procedure?
Can this be an official part of this game? But I did it with like this, like the straight face. I do have a question actually. Do you want to say yum
The judge
yum?
was excited that you're like, all right, so when you hold the priority on rampant growth and you yum yum.
And you yum yum. Yeah, the judge is having a great old time.
The game begins, and all the Verdance player is looking for is copies of Rampant Growth Life. So they play defensive cards to buy time, starting the first turn with "This round's on me" to debuff all of Summer's incoming offense. Summer pushes some damage and sends back. The Verdance player activates the staff, dealing just 1 damage after Arcane Barrier, and drawing a card, finding the first Rampant Growth. They put a Tome of Findel in Arsenal, which will, on the next turn, draw them 2 cards and gain them life equal to the cards in their hand. The Verdance player draws up and finds the second copy of Rampant Growth Life. Game on. Summer attacks with a Remorseless, which will cause the Verdance player to take a damage every time they play an action on their next turn. This will prove, unfortunately, inconsequential. The turn goes back to Verdance, and now things go completely off the rails. Stick with me. Verdance plays Tome of Findel from Arsenal, drawing 2 cards and gaining 6 life for having 6 cards in hand. They discard Fruits of the Forest to its own ability, gaining 2 more life. They play the first Rampant Growth Life, let life resolve and gain 1 more life. Holding priority on Rampant Growth, they play the second copy of Rampant Growth Life, gaining 1 more life. With 2 copies of Rampant Growth on the stack, they've gained 10 life, so each one of these is going to amp for 10. They then use the ability on their Plume of Evergrowth to get 1 of the copies of Rampant Growth back from the graveyard and play it again, gaining 1 more life and amping this time for 11 for a grand total of 31 amp. Kraken's Aether Vein is activated to deal 32 damage, which, after Arcane Barrier, draws them 31 cards. They play 2 copies of Thrive and then attack with a Fire Breathing, taking some damage to Remorseless, of course. Thanks to Double Thrive, every time they activate Fire Breathing's ability, it's going to gain +3 attack power instead of 1. And so...
11, 14, 17, 19, 22, 25, 26, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 36, 38, 41, 44, 47, 48... 50, 53, 56.
Okay, well, don't forget you're going to amp again.
Yes, there will be an amp trigger.
We need to track that
yes.
amping.
I lost count.
Wait, I'm
50.
so
I believe it was 53, 54.
That's how Summer's going to win this game.
55, 58, 61.
Yeah, for sure.
So this is 61 times 3 is 180. This is 186.
Yeah, I don't think this is gonna cover that up.
Verdance attacks with a Fire Breathing for 186 physical damage. What's incredible is that the Verdance player actually miscounted, and the true value of this Fire Breathing is 195. Summer's armor is just short of covering up the damage, and Verdance wins the match.
So, obviously this was an unintended interaction from LSS. Did you ever receive any sort of formal apology from them, given that you were, basically sacrificed for Kraken's Aether Vein sins? It seems like they kind of owe you one, right?
I know, they really do. Well, James has given me a hug, so okay. I figured that debt is clear.
Yeah, well.
And actually, there was a dev talk like the week after, where Brian and Jimmy Blanco, apologize to Minmax and like the people for like subjecting us to Kraken's Eighth Vein LL.
And look at
Yeah.
us now. LL is in a surprisingly okay place despite a couple of hiccups along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's a great format. I think people underrate it. Maybe this is just my bias towards Alexi and that being the only format I can play her in. But
Yeah, I mean, there's so many cool heroes in there. I want the format to be good, so I agree with you there.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to the people, and I'm sure they will see you on this channel again before long.
quite soon, in fact.
Thanks, Summer.
All right. Thanks, Brian.
Naturally, a Prism exploded Verdance in the finals, leaving everyone with a feeling that this was a perfectly balanced metagame and that every other deck would adapt to the new strategy. Just kidding, LSS banned it 3 days later. Thank you so much for watching this first episode of Showstoppers. There are so many incredible heroes and decks, and so many more ridiculous coverage moments to go over, so stay tuned for some more great stories in the future, and if you're digging what we're doing over here, a like and a subscribe goes a long way, so thank you so very much, and have a great day.